All right, we're back. We are COMP125. That's client-side web development in the summer 2018 semester at Centennial, and we're week 3, part 1. I'm going to start talking about arrays, loops, and hosting, which we get as one part of what you need to do for your assignment number 1, right? How do I host my website live? There's a couple of options for this, and I'm going to give you one of them today, which is Github Pages, right? So let's start with that. So let's suppose I have my website and I want to put it up. If you look at Github Pages is a free hosting solution for your GitHub repos, right? So I'm going to put this up on our Slack channel. So why am I recommending this and not something else? There's lots of options, lots and lots of options, right? Well, because it's free, number one. So that's actually the wrong thing. Let's just delete that one. That's not what I wanted. I wanted this one. Let's try that again. That's the one. So GitHub Pages, what it is it allows you to, host your pages live on GitHub. And you don't need a special account or special license or anything like that, or you don't have to pay anything, right? Which is kind of cool. If you notice that there is a step-by-step, so pages.github.com is the site. I put it up on our Slack channel. If there is a step-by-step you can follow, it's kind of really simple. You take your username, whatever your username is, that's the first part, and you add .github.io at the end, and that is your GitHub page. All right, so that's the first part. So username.github.io. So for me, I have a page that I have called Tsiliopoulos.github.io. And if I go there, you can see that it's going to take me to one of my pages. This is my little game that I made last semester, web game, right? Notice also that it flips me to my custom domain, right? Which you can also have. You can have a custom domain pointing at your site. So we're going to talk about how to do this and the requirements that you need to make this work. And there are some special requirements, right? So, but you can do this for any one of your projects. So you don't have to just do it for your name. You can have / and then the project name .github.io, right? So what I mean by that is, let's suppose I had another project that I wanted to host that was within my, again, this is my custom domain, so don't worry about this. I purchased it, yeah. You could do that. There's some really cool cheap domains you can buy from GoDaddy and other places. I'm just going to use GoDaddy. I'm not affiliated with GoDaddy in any way, but I use it for a lot of stuff, so I just want to put it out there. So let's suppose you had some name that you wanted to purchase. Let's say myfunnynames.ca, if you wanted to kind of purchase that domain, if it's available, as an example, and it is in this particular case, yay, right? I lucked out, right? It's $4.99 a year. It's not that much money, right? So it's not like you're going to pay a whole hell of a lot of money to purchase your own domain, right? And notice it says restrictions apply. Restrictions apply because I'm using the .ca domain, any .ca top-level domain. The problem with that is that you have to be a Canadian citizen or live in Canada in order for you to use this. But you can also do myfunnynames.com at $14.99. You can see the difference in price. There's also other ones they recommend. myfunnynames.info, $3.99. That doesn't require any special privileges. Notice the cross out though, and I'm going to show you this because it doesn't matter where you go, whether it's GoDaddy, register.com, I don't know, whatever you want to go to. Sometimes they have a special rate, introductory rate for the whole year, and it's like $3.99. Then there's a crossed out rate over here, $29.99. That's the real rate. So after the year, it's going to go to $29.99. Just be aware of that, right? So if you see this other one, like $7.69 for myfunnynames.tech, and then it's $89.89 for the, after every year after that. Be careful, because if you wanted to keep that name as an example, then you'd have to pay that extra rate, this part right here, $89.89 going forward. So just, I think especially if it's something for yourself, there's some really cheap ones too. myfunnynames.site, $1.27 for the first year, and then $51 every year after that. All right, so they kind of have an introductory rate or whatever. Be careful. Also, be careful of these premium domains like namesfound.com at $1,000. It's crazy, right? So some domains we can think of are like really expensive, and some of them are reasonably priced. Like this one's not bad. I mean, myfunnynames.club, 0.99, so $1, and then $20.99. That's not bad. 29 between $10 and $20 is a reasonable amount, like for a domain every single year, right? You can find cheaper rates, absolutely. There's lots of them out there, but you can see that the regular prices are no less than $15 to $20, right? Why did I select .com? Because .com is the de facto, I would say, one you should use for all your websites. And in fact, and again, this is not related to JavaScript, but if you're going to make a website for a friend, mother, sister's, cousin's, uncle, which I recommend you don't, right? Because of all, and I've talked about this in other courses as well. Don't do work for other people, like your friends and family, because friends and family are the most demanding people. They'll for the free work that you're going to do for them, they're going to make you do extra free work forever. I don't recommend you do it for anybody. Charge them like you would charge anybody else. Hell, even charge them extra. And because they're going to be the most demanding, because they're going to say, hey, you're a student, and I'm going to give you a chance to do work on my website, and you should turn it around on them and say, I'm a student, and I'll give you a chance to work with me, right? I'm going to charge you $45 an hour, or another way of thinking about this is like $200 a page, right? That's another way of doing it. Yeah. I know you guys are thinking I'm crazy, but if you charge them $200 a page, and if they have 5 pages, it's at least $1,000, right? And they're going to think twice. So, but if they go with it, yay, build them a 5-page WordPress site, and you're good. But the reason why I'm saying that about friends and family is because they can be, unless you set up a relationship with them. And it's always, I don't know, it's my opinion. Again, this is not the course, but my opinion is try not to do work for friends and family. Business and pleasure and business and family usually don't mix well, in my experience. It just can lead into problems. It's better to work with other people. If you do it for them and you want to do it for free, tell them in advance, as an example, that you're not going to support anything. This is as is. You're providing the site as is. They have to find somebody to support it afterwards. And if you start with that expectation ahead of time, you'll still get into trouble, but at least you'll get into less trouble if you say, okay, I can't do this anymore, right? Because remember that sometimes it's a lot more difficult than you thought it was going to be. So a project that might take you in your mind, you're thinking it's probably going to take me 10 hours to do this, might end up taking 30 or 40 or 50 hours, especially when they ask you to do more stuff. So on that, one more word before I go on. It's not related to the course, but I'm going to tell you this, because I've been, I've done web lots of times, a lot of projects, is the case of the might as wells. Might as wells. And you're like, what the hell is might as wells? So, okay, so you hire a carpenter for your house, and he wants to, you have him come in, and I know that some of you maybe not relate to this, but I'm going to talk about it as if we're building a house. So the carpenter comes in, you say, I want you to knock down this wall, right? And I want you to open up my kitchen. I want to make an open kitchen. I want to make a new look for my house. And he says, okay, no problem. So he starts working on the wall, opens it up, and you see some wiring in there. And he says, you've got some old wiring inside the wall. And you say to him, well, we opened the wall. We might as well fix the wiring. Okay? And he goes, also, you notice that the plumbing is a little old. You got some copper pipes in there, and, might as well fix those copper pipes. The question for you guys is, he's a carpenter. Was the wiring and the copper pipes part of the original project? No, but you might as well, because you're always doing it. And that's how scope creep comes up. It kind of expands your project. So whenever you have something like, well, could you add this? Could you increase this? Could you modify this? That's all extras. That's modification. That's a scope change. And that always happens with family for the most part. They say, well, it looks really good when you good. You know what? It'd be great if you did this. Yeah, it would be great, but that wasn't part of our agreement, right? And that's why it's difficult to deal with people, who are friends and family. You have to have an agreement in place for changes. And most people don't want to sign anything when they're your family. So enough of that. So, but going back to this, myfunnynames.ca and myfunnynames.com, the reason why I brought this up is because People want to have the small company, they have an indie startup or whatever, and they want to buy, they want to start a business. And I always say this, think about your domain name. What is it? It should have probably 3 syllables at the most, right? Because you don't want a huge domain name, right? Even my domain name, Siliopoulos.com, is pretty long and unpronounceable, right? Like my last name. So imagine my email would be like tom@Siliopoulos.com. It's really long, right? So imagine someone made up I don't know, they have a name like, you know, mysmartinteractivenetworks.ca, right? Something really long. Imagine an email address like that. So tom@mysmartinteractivenetworks.ca. I have to type that all out every single time I email somebody. Whew, right? Try and keep it short. And the funny thing is, the shorter the name is, the more expensive it is. It's really funny. Example would be an unavailable as well. So example, if I put something like, you know, funny1.ca or .com, you know, you might think that funny1.com is available, right? But funny1.com is taken, right? Oh yeah, funny1. Funny1.ca is $4.99 though. That's why I recommend you look at a lot of stuff. And I always start with when they're starting to form a company, start with the domain. Can they make a domain with their company name? And if they can, it's probably a good company name, right? Something that's reasonable. Yeah, it's tough to find a domain like this. But for your last name, guys, or if you're making this like how I did with your first name and last name, it's not that difficult. So if I was going to talk, you know, maybe if my name was like, you know, Bob R. Smith, right? And let's just suppose that was my name. I could find Bob R. Smith, you know, .ca, no problem, even .com, right, as a reasonable thing, because it's my name, right? And it's nothing wrong with making your name into a website, because you could point your resume there. You could this is your portfolio, right? So we're talking about selling yourself to prospective employers. Buy your name, man. Buy your website, and so that it's yours, right? So you can actually say, here, go to my website, and it's you know, Bob at, you know, bobarsmith.ca or info@bobarsmith.ca, right? Notice Bob R. Smith adheres to my 3-syllable, you know, rule as much as possible. 1, 2, 3. Bob R. Smith, right? Nice and easy to say, easy to pronounce, easy to type out, right? Sometimes your name is too long, but pick something that makes sense for you. If you're going to buy this, it's not required for your assignment number 1, by the way. I'm just putting it out there because mine has that, right? Let's take a look at my page to how I did that. So in order for you to do that, if I go to github.com, right, and I'm not going to go to Centennial for a second. I'm going to go to my own account, right, so the one that has my name on it. So I'm just going to go to here, right? And if you notice, if I go to my profile, this is like yours. So it'd be like your profile page, right? So my profile's there. I got a picture, whatever, and I got some repositories. One of them is going to be my github.io page, right? There it is. So underneath that, you can see the structure of my github.io page. And that's why I'm showing it to you, so you can mimic my structure, okay? One thing to note, if you're using Node.js, Node modules by default with GitHub Pages is disabled. Yeah, so you have to have it's disabled. Node modules, you won't be able to see Node modules. If you use a page that requires Node modules or Node, any Node site, Node modules is ignored, the whole folder. That's bad because you have your JavaScript, you have your, you know, your jQuery, you have other things in there, and if it's disabled, your site won't work anymore. Okay, so if you look at this Node modules as an example, this is all the stuff. These are all the JavaScript libraries I was using at the time, and so none of this would work, right? However, you can get around that by using a .NodeJekyll file in your .github.io folder. So NodeJekyll is nothing inside of this. It's just an empty .NodeJekyll file, like this, NodeJekyll. And so you need that if you're going to put it up on GitHub Pages. And you're using Node modules like I showed you how to use last week, okay? Because you're using Node to get your jQuery and Bootstrap, remember? So you have a Node modules folder. And if you have this and you want to make it work, you need to use this empty .NodeJekyll file. You need to include this in your repository, okay? The other thing is, if you're going to use a custom domain and point to GitHub, you need to have a CNAME file as well. This CNAME file, which is what I needed from my Siliopoulos.com, right? If you don't need it, you won't need this CNAME file, all right? If you're not going to make a custom domain. But if you notice, my CNAME file just has my full domain name, www.studiopoulos.com. That's required to make that work. So those two things is what you need in order for you to have a custom domain, CNAME, and a .node Jekyll would be for anything that uses node modules. Okay.
Is it empty file as well?
CNAME is not empty. CNAME is going to be the name of your domain that you buy, right? And you still have to point your domain, which I'm not going to go over how to do that, to GitHub because it's out of scope. So, but if you want to do that, it's not that difficult. If you Google it, it'll tell you how to point your custom domain to anywhere, right? And to GitHub specifically, it'll tell you how to do that, and that you need a CNAME. So .node Jekyll, let me continue. So .node Jekyll, right, is what's required. Okay, let's put up I'm going to replace my github.io page. I'm going to get rid of that game for now, right? And if you notice on the back, on my desktop, I don't have a github.io anything. So just to preserve that so I don't lose that, I mean, although I'm not really nervous about it, let's just grab it and download it. So just to download this for a second, I'm just going to download my zip file, right? There it is. So it's downloaded. There's my github.io, right? So just I'm gonna do it with you guys right now. I'm gonna replace this thing with our project that we've been working with all this time. It's not going to be exciting, right? Not going to be exciting as a game, but it'll work. Okay, so how do we do this? So here's your step-by-step on how to use your GitHub pages. So one, you need to make it the name of your project has to be the name of your GitHub page, right? Typically what I normally do is see this COMP125 S2018 lesson 2A. That's what we did last week, right? I'm just going to copy this. So I'm just going to make a copy of it and paste it on my desktop. And when I do, it says COMP125 S2018 lesson 2A copy. Well, this can't be this way. This has to say my account name. You would replace this with your account name, .github.io, all right?
Is it necessary to use IU?
Everything is necessary that I'm telling you. If you don't do this, and if you hook into another, you have to make this repository on your site as well. So example would be on my GitHub right now, I have this repository, and I'm going to erase it. And we haven't talked about erasing repositories before, so I'm going to do that with you right now. Okay, so the way to delete a repository, if you want to clean up your GitHub, is to go to settings for the repository, right? And if you scroll down, first let me copy this because I'm going to need it. If you scroll down, there's an area that says danger zone, right here. See this danger zone? This allows you to delete the repository like it never existed. So when I delete this thing, it's gone, like nothing. There's no record of it anymore, and you can't get it back, right? So delete the repository, and then I'm going to put in the name. It asked me for the name of my repository, so I'm going to put that in. That's the name of my repository. So studiopoulos.github.io, and I say I understand the consequences. Delete this repository. Delete. Then I got to put my password in because it really wants to make sure you want to do this. And if I put it in correctly, maybe I can, maybe I can't. I can't remember. Sorry. And also my typing has got to be absolutely perfect for this. Done. But now I have, if I go to my page, like this, it's going to point in, this is a cache to my browser. That's why it's showing up. But if I refresh or if I go back to it, eventually it's going to not work, right? The reason why it's working right now is cached in my browser. If I look at it from another browser, right? So if I look at it from, I don't know, let's look at Firefox or something, because I use Chrome a lot. So here's Firefox, and if I want to go there, it should not work anymore, right? It's cached there too. Sorry. But anyways, eventually it won't work anymore.
We restart it.
No, it won't do it. Let me try it with incognito mode. That might work. So let's try going incognito. There we go. No, that's even cached there. So it's cached. It's cached even in incognito mode. Anyway, at the end of the day, right, what I'm trying to show you is it's wiped out. There is no more site that shows you what it is, right? It's trying to point to something that doesn't exist. And eventually, over the course of a day or so, it's going to change. Now, what does that mean for me? So if I want to make a new repository, right, this is the steps that you need for your assignment number 1. Please follow carefully, all right? New repository. I'm going to name it See, let's say this is my account name. Okay, so it would be like your account name, whatever your account name is. It's got to start off like that. So mine would be tsiliopoulos.github.io. Okay, it has to be this. All right, it cannot be anything else other than this. It won't work otherwise. All right, now you can have subfolders. So if you wanted to have a website for each of your projects, then you could point to your subfolder that's inside of this structure, and you could host all of them if you wanted to. Okay, but this is what you need to start off with. Whatever your name is, your name, your account name, .github.io must be your repo. And that means all of you will have only one of these, theoretically. Okay? I'm going to click, and I say theoretically because you can, if you have an organization, they can have their own. If you have other ones, you can have multiple accounts. You can do all kinds of stuff, right? I'm going to click Create Repository. Notice it's public for now. You can make it private if you want. I'm not going to, and I'm not going to initialize it with a README or any kind of git ignore file or whatever. Create. So that's the first step. So the first step is I have an empty repository, which is tsiliopoulos.github.io, and it says .git. All right. So these are all the steps I need, right? I have a copy of my repository or the copy of my project from last week, which I renamed to this, to the same name as my repository. Okay, that's step number 1, maybe. The other one was step number 2. But there's a problem. I have my old .git folder in there. I don't want it, right? If you wanted to keep it, you could, right? Because it would keep track of your commits and so on. But this is not really important. I'm not looking at your I'm not going to look at your .github.io for your commits. I'm looking at your main repo for your commits. This one is just for us to show your project online, okay? So it's okay if you get rid of this .git for now, because we have to make a new one anyway. So delete.
Okay, in this case, it is a hidden folder.
And I made it visible because I went to Control Panel to make it visible. I went to Control Panel, right? And I went to, and I'm using Windows 10, so if you have Windows 8 or Windows 7, it won't work the same exactly, but almost the same. I went to File Explorer Options, I went to View, and notice in my view, if I want to, where it says Hidden Files and Folders, I show hidden files and folders and drives. I also I do not hide extensions of known file types. I also undid this one, right? And I also undid the hide protected operating system files because sometimes I need to get in there and look at those too. For example, my roaming profile. So that's why I undid these. This is what my options look like, right? If I press apply and press OK, right, you can see that I'm going to be able to see all hidden files and folders in my file explorer. Okay, you need to do that, guys. You'll never see your .git folder, at least not in file explorer. You have to use the dir/al command to see it all. And that's not as effective. Okay, so cool. So I've got no files and folders in here. I need a couple files, right? I need a CNAME and I need a .nojekyll file. All right. So first, let's kick off my Visual Studio Code. Here it is. Here's my Visual Studio Code. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag and drop this into here. So my tsiliopoulos.github.io project, the one that's a copy of my other one, in here. Okay, that's all it is. And there's some stuff missing. Like I said, I need to have a .nojekyll. It has to be spelled correctly. All right, because if you don't spell it right, that's one. And the other one is I need a CNAME. CNAME must be all caps with no extension. So let's do that one first. So I'm going to get a new one. I'm going to put CNAME, right? So this is if you have your custom domain. So mine would be www. That's what it is, right? And save that. You don't need it if you don't have your custom domain. But I'm showing you if you buy your own custom domain, what you need. The other one is the .nojekyll. Yeah.
If you don't have a custom name, but you can file, just leave it.
You can leave it empty if you want. You might need it one day, and you might as well put it in there. But it's not going to work anyway. It doesn't matter. It's not going to affect your site. So yeah, you can include it and make it empty in there if you want. Then the next one, of course, would be the .nojekyll. Now, there's a special way to type .nojekyll. And if you are confused by how to type it, I can't even remember how to do it. Let's say I'm going to go look it up, right? So I'll say .nojekyll. And if I'm right, it's like this, right? And it tells you, look, if I look it up, .nojekyll, right? It tells you .nojekyll file, you need to make deploying a static site to GitHub Pages need .NoJekyll, right? So here it is. I've spelled it correctly, NoJekyll. And by the way, I'm going to put this exact spelling. It has to be exactly spelled this way. It will not work unless it is, right? I'm going to put this up on our Slack, right? So it has to be, you must include, I'll put must with caps, must include a .NoJekyll file in the root of your folder. Right? If you don't put it there, it'll never work. Okay, so that's number one. So .NoJekyll. So if I go back to here, and if I add it in, okay, it's like this, .NoJekyll. Okay. Cool. Notice it's empty. I don't need anything else, just an empty file. All right. It's required for GitHub Pages to know that I want to use everything that's in my node modules folder. If you don't include this, node modules will fail.
So far, the node modules are not working.
If you don't include this, anything inside the node modules folder will be ignored, which is bad because we're using node modules because we're using npm to grab our jQuery and Bootstrap and Font Awesome. Okay, all that stuff will be ignored, and that means your page will look like crap.
But how does it?
What do you mean, how does it work?
I mean, it's a blank file. What does it?
So GitHub, what it does, GitHub Pages. So the question is, how does it work? So GitHub, when it sees that there's a .NoJekyll file in your folder when it's hosting your site, will say, I need to include node modules if it exists. That's what it does. It's nothing to do with you. It's to do with them. It's their requirement. Okay, cool. So now this is all you need. So I'm good. Okay, let's do a couple things. Let's open this up in command prompt. This is the next part because remember, I just wiped out my GitHub, right? There's no Git local repository, and I need to do all that work that I normally do, right? So I need to do something like this. I need to say git init, git add dot. You should know this by heart by now. Git commit -m, initial commit, all the same stuff, guys. Good. And then now we need to add those last two lines, which is I need some kind of remote to connect to my remote, and I need to push to my remote, right? Well, you can get that off your GitHub pages, right? So if you look at this or your GitHub account, look, the last two lines, like I said, are the lines you need. I don't have to type it by hand. The lines that you need to work. So I'm going to copy this, go back to my command prompt, right-click and paste, and press Enter, and that should upload everything to my new Ciliopoulos.github.io repo. Now remember, because my old Ciliopoulos.github.io pages was already in my browser, it's going to be cached. So if I was to go to it right now, I'm going to probably see my game, right? But if you go to it, try it. Go to www.ciliopoulos.com. You might see the page. Now it takes a few moments. It could take hours for it to propagate through the web, right? For it to work properly, because of caching. So if you tried it out, it may work, right? So the way to go is try and go to ciliopoulos.github.io, this last thing. And what I'll do is I'll copy it and put it inside of our Slack so you can get to it. So the actual page is, you can try ciliopoulos.com. This is your test. You can also try ciliopoulos.github.io. Those are the two that you should try, right? So if you check that out, if you go to Slack and try them out. So if I try this one, I should still see my page. Oh, hey, look, it's already started to work. It already changed, right? And if so that worked right there for you. Okay, so now I'm hosting our project, right, that we did last week live for anybody to see that has access to the internet. Right? And that's what I want you guys to do for assignment 1. Okay? It's easy, it's free, and it's quick. And there's nothing for you to do. There's nothing to sign up. You already signed up with GitHub. You have access to this. Okay? Any questions around this? Because guys and girls, we need to do this, at least something like this for next week.
Can you just repeat about your own page or your pages or GitHub?
I kind of covered that pretty good. Yes, so I mean, all you have to do is create your own folder. So if you follow the instructions on GitHub Pages, GitHub Pages tell you the instructions. Create a repository. What Git client are you using? If you're using a desktop client or terminal, if you type terminal, it tells you the commands you have to put in. It tells you everything, right? So there is literally nothing for you to guess at. The only thing that you have to do is copy and paste your files as well as .node Jekyll inside that folder. Also, will never work. Yeah.
Again about the cloud deploy.
This is the cloud deploy that I want you to do, right? There's nothing different about this. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by it?
Like you tell that you must deploy your site.
GitHub.
In just a small.
What do you mean? How do I repeat it? I just told you what to do. I give you a step-by-step. Watch the fine video. I'm so sorry. Yeah, the video is there. It's recorded, right? So you can always go back and do it. Follow the steps in the video, please, right? It's required for your assignment number 1. But if you wanted to use, I'll give you a couple of other options, all right? These are not as cheap, but let's try it anyway, right? One of them is Microsoft Azure. So if I go to, if I look at Microsoft Azure, this is a more of a business, kind of solid kind of solution for you if you wanted to, even sell this to your customers. Microsoft has made it their job to basically break into the cloud, and cloud computing has been one of their, I would say their, focuses over the last several years, right? Cloud computing is huge. The original leader for cloud computing probably would have been Amazon, AWS, Amazon Web Services. I'm not going to talk about that today, and it's not the subject of our course, right? But Amazon is the leader, and then followed by Google and Microsoft. And they kind of, I'm not sure if Google or Microsoft is first now, after Amazon. But Amazon's first, and then Google and Microsoft come second. I know that Microsoft has pulled ahead over the last little while and gotten closer to popularity with Amazon. Why? Because it's super easy to connect. As students, you have access to doing this yourself. So if you really want to sign up with Microsoft Azure, that's why I'm bringing Azure up. If you go to e5onthehub.com, and I may have told you about this before. I think we covered E5 on the Hub. Yeah? If you look at, if I want to search for students, right, as an example, or view my free software, again, and for those people who forgot how to do this, you can see that these are all things that are free for students, right? And you can search for yourself. A lot of them have Microsoft Azure as an option too. And let me just go back to that first page here. So if I go to search now, what's available for you, I can put in my country. So I can say Canada. I can go to my province, which is Ontario, and look at my school, which is Centennial. So again, if you couldn't get to it, here it is right here. And you look at the department, which is our Centennial College of Applied Arts, Engineering, this one. And there's this one, ICTC test. Which one do you think it is? It's the second one, right? ICTC test, if you don't know what it is. This one here. And if you look at that one, it says Centennial College of Applied Arts, to view all available offerings, click this, or view all software, one of the two. I'm going to click this one. And notice that it says new Microsoft Azure for students, right? So if you follow the instructions here, right, if you add this to cart, now again, you have to be signed up with Microsoft Azure. It says Azure for students gets you started with $100 in Azure credits to be used within the first 12 months, plus select free services as described below. And it talks about all the free services here, which I'm not going to go into. It's your responsibility if you want to use this to set it up. I'm not going to do it. However, if you follow the instructions, add to cart and follow the instructions with Microsoft, and if you communicate with Microsoft, if there's any kind of problems, you can have a free Microsoft Azure account that does not require your credit card, all right, that you can use for hosting. So now this is for you guys to, free for students. Now this is for you guys to watch and not do with me, because if you don't have Microsoft Azure, you can't do this, and you probably don't. So this is how you do it. If I had a Microsoft Azure account, I would go to portal.azure.com. And I got to make sure it's me, which one of me it is, right? Because I've got many me's, right? Like you guys do. So I'm going to go to the one that makes sense for me, which is this one, right? My Hotmail one. And I'm going to click next. It's going to log me in with the password. Might ask me to sign in with two-step authentication. May not. I may have said this computer is okay not to use two-step. And if you notice, I've got some examples of here. This is Microsoft Azure's dashboard. It's kind of really cool and interactive. Now, this is more of a professional solution for you guys as opposed to GitHub. GitHub Pages is for small little sites you want to make that are not, that don't have a backend. They don't have, you know, they're not connecting to Microsoft SQL Server. They don't have a other kind of server in the backend. There's nothing. It's just like literally a static site that you're serving. That's okay for GitHub Pages, right? Small games or whatever that's that kind of are self-supportive and all that kind of stuff, you're good to go. But if you have something that you need to have more robust, something more robust, then you're going to have to use, you know, something that's like Microsoft Azure, you know, Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud Platform, whatever, which one of those you want, right? There's also other solutions. You can also set up your own VM somewhere and whatever. Again, hosting is not really a subject of our course, but I'll show you a quick how to do it. So let's do it. So I'm going to set up a new, I'm going to click this little plus, new resource, and it's going to give me some options in Microsoft. One I want is web app, right? So I'm going to click web app. And I want to kind of talk about what it is. So I'm going to name it. Now this name is got to be unique for the entire world. Okay, so this is not something that you can put in that's going to be a copy of what it is. So I'm going to use my last name. So hopefully it's not taken. So looks like we're good. See the check mark? That means your last name at azurewebsites.net is okay. That's what it means. Subscription. My subscription says DreamSpark. DreamSpark is the old subscription that you will probably not have access to anymore. Your subscription service will be called Microsoft Imagine. That's the new one that people use now. Okay. What does this mean? There's two options: DreamSpark or Microsoft Imagine for you guys, or pay as you go. Pay as you go literally is what it says. You put your credit card in and you pay. If you chose pay as you go and you put your credit card in, that means you didn't follow the instructions on e5.onthehub.com, because you should not need the pay as you go option. So I'm using DreamSpark, which is equivalent to the free option that you're going to have. All right. Then it says resource group. This is kind of different. You can create your own, create a new one, or you can use an existing one. And I've created some ahead of time. All they are is just a place where I'm going to get my resource. I'm going to use Canada East. Here it is. You can create a new one too. It's not a big deal. And then when it says app service plan, notice I'm going to use one that I've already created. You can also create a new one. All right. What you want is the free service plan. You don't want one that says it's the fastest and with the most processors and all that kind of stuff for your website. You don't need that. Just get a free service plan. And if I was going to create one for you, let's do it together. So if let's say I make a new one, let's call it this, right? And if I, kind of make a new service plan, you can see that I have a choice of what my service plan will be called, right? Notice the pricing tier, right? And then the locations. You have several locations you can choose. These locations are data centers across the world that you can choose, right? So obviously you want to choose a data center that's close to us. Somewhere in Canada would be nice, or United States. If you chose Japan or someplace like that, might not be good. It might take a little longer because there's latency between that web server and you, right? We're in Canada. Going to a Japan website probably can make it happen, right? Even though your website says .github.io, it's hosted in Japan somewhere. It's going to take longer, right? So host it here somewhere. So I'm going to choose something like Canada East, right? And then you can name it, whatever. I'm not going to do this right now because I've already done this. Notice the pricing tier, which says free. That's good. If you choose another pricing tier, which you can, like other ones, where that requires more and more services somehow, with more CPU and more memory and more storage, it will not be free. And that would be very bad. That means you're going to pay like heavy duty fees for this thing through your credit card. Please don't do that. It depends. Don't ask me that. It depends. Out of scope of this course. I'm just showing you how to do it if you're going to do it. You can do whatever you want. You can have as much storage as you want, pay $1 million if you want to Microsoft. I don't recommend it, right?
What's the minimum?
The minimum, if you're going to pay as you go, would probably be like a $15 plan that you'd probably pay. There's no free. Well, there is free with Microsoft as well, but typically there's always a charge because it's pay as you go. So depending on how much traffic you have, that's why it's pay as you go. The more traffic you get, the more money you pay every month, right? For most of us, you're not going to pay anything because no one's going to go to your website, right? But for some of us, if you're hosting something crazy, you know, whatever, you might pay something. But let's suppose you're not gonna host anything, and we're gonna go back to my existing one that I already created, which is free. I'm gonna just choose Canada East. You would have set this up ahead of time, right? And notice my Canada Central is free. This is the one I'm using. I'm gonna say okay. Now, when I've chosen my free plan, I can pin to my dashboard, which you want to do so you can see it, and click Create. Once I've done this, if everything goes well and I've got my subscription working and I've used a free resource group and a service plan, you're going to see this area here that says Deploying My App. It's going to start deploying my app. And all this means is that it's going to create an empty container. That's all it's going to do. It's going to create an empty container that's hosted up on Microsoft Azure for your app. That's all it's going to do. By the way, this works for Node apps. It works for MySQL apps. You have to kind of connect to some kind of MySQL server. That's a whole different conversation. But I'm saying you could put anything up here because Microsoft's Azure supports virtual machines, machine learning, everything you want. And they'll charge you for everything you do, right? But now you can see that my app has been created, but I have nothing on it. How do I connect to it? Well, you could use the traditional FTP, and notice it gives you an FTP hostname if you really wanted to go do this, and my username and all that kind of stuff. But I'm not going to do FTP, right? What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to do a deploy from GitHub. Yeah, you can do that. You can do a direct deploy from GitHub. So if you look at deployment options, this is the option you want to hit here, right? And again, this is from my site, Celiopolis, right? Here's my deployment options from GitHub. If I click deployment options, it's going to give me some options. Like, for example, choose my source. I can choose GitHub. There's also other sources. You can choose Microsoft Team Services, OneDrive, hell, even Dropbox, right? But I'm going to choose GitHub because we have a GitHub account, right? And now you have to give permission to Microsoft. It's going to ask you for permission to access your GitHub account and so on. I've already done this, so that's why I'm not being asked, right? But notice this is my authorization, which I've already given. Here's your organization. I can choose other organizations that I have, but I'm just going to choose this one. I can choose my project, and here's my project, right? It actually sees my project on GitHub, which is kind of cool. That's the one I want. And which branch? I'm choosing the master branch. And if I want to, I can configure a performance test, which I'm not going to do here. And if everything goes well, if I press OK, and if everything goes well, I can set up my site live on Microsoft Azure. It's the same exact site that I'm hosting on GitHub Pages, but I'm setting up on Azure. And if I refresh this page for a second, just to show you, one thing to check is don't assume that it's going to work until you see the check mark. And what I mean by that is right now what it's doing is it's looking at this, my GitHub repo, and it's got this little cycle that's going, hey, everything's good. Until I see a check mark here, it's not worked. And sometimes, my friends, depending on what you have in your root of your folder and other things, it may not work. I may not get a check mark here. And that's why I'm showing it to you as an option. I recommend GitHub Pages. GitHub Pages is nice and easy. It's free, and it covers everything we need. For the remainder of this semester, you're not going to need anything more. But I'm showing you this as an option, just in case you want to be more professional. I get a check mark. That's pretty good. Check mark means everything deployed okay. Doesn't mean everything works okay. I need to check, right? So how do I check this? If I click on Overview, you can see that it's going to give me a site name, which is right here. It's celiopolis.azurewebsites.net. If I click onto this, if everything went well, I should see my website deployed. So now check this out. If you go to Celiopolis, you guys can see this too. If you go, this is worldwide, just like my GitHub Pages. If I go to this one, here's the other one you can check out. That'll also work for you. You can actually click on there and it'll work. So there's two different ways of doing it that I showed you. I think that should be enough. All right. There are many other options. There's also the school option. There's some school server that they may have given you access to as well. If you're using the school server, when you hand in your assignment number 1, please indicate that you're using the school server because I have to be here physically to access it, most likely. Okay, it won't work outside of the school. All right. And I'm not going to show you how to do that. That's on you. Okay, any questions around deployment? Again, if you have a real question, if you want to see my step-by-step again, please look at the video that'll be available after this course, after this session, right? But that's pretty much the ease of use of getting it done. Notice that even though I put it up on Azure websites.net, I didn't say that you need the .node Jekyll file because it's Microsoft. Microsoft doesn't require it. The only one that requires it is GitHub, because GitHub is a free service, and they want to know if you want to use node modules. If you didn't include the .node Jekyll file in Microsoft, it's okay. It would still work.
Okay, for the paid service, we don't have backend database?
No. It's literally a very simple web server. It doesn't give you anything like that. Okay? So even for the paid, the question is, even for the paid GitHub service, would it give you a backend database? The answer is no, it wouldn't. Not for that. It's just for a very simple page, just in case you want to serve up a wiki or some kind of content page, something like that. And for our page, our example, it's perfect. They support everything. They support everything. Google, Amazon Web Services, Microsoft, they support any kind of project you can possibly think of, pretty much, right? Even natural language processing, even AI, whatever you want, right? But that requires a whole other course, which is not this course. I just wanted to show you how to host a very simple website online, which is what I did. All right, moving on. So we have our site live. That's how I did it. And I did it with this github.com Cleopolis, which is my account name, cleopolis.github.io.git, which is the actual, this is the repo online. And that's what you need to make GitHub Pages work. So I got it both on Microsoft Azure and on GitHub Pages. Okay. Two things to note. I can switch out whatever I put up on my main site, like I've done before, cleopolis.github.io, anytime I want. Right. So if I want to put a game up there now, I can put it back, and it'll be the game that I had before. I won't do that now. I'll do it later on the semester when I actually have a game course that I'm going to host. All right, so that's that part. And the reason why I talked about this again is just for your assignment number 1. To cover the requirements of your assignment number 1, one of the requirements is a live site, which is worth 4 marks out of your 50 some odd marks, whatever it's worth. That's almost 10% what I just showed you how to do, right? And it's really not that difficult to do if you follow the instructions. Okay, so please follow the instructions, get it done early, test it now, right? So you don't have to wait till next week to go, Tom, it's not working. I tried it and it's like Thursday, and tomorrow it's my assignment's due on Friday and it's not working. Don't test it on Thursday for Friday. Test it now for Friday, next Friday, right? And if you have problems, we can work it out. We can go through it and I can go, kind of go over with you. But this week's not lesson 2, this week's lesson 3, right? So let's copy this one. I'm gonna make a copy of this one. I'm gonna copy this one. I'm going to paste it again. I'm going to make a copy of lesson 2 into lesson 3. I'm going to call this lesson 3A because we're going to have maybe lesson 3B tomorrow. Maybe. So 3A. And I want to bring up I want to put this into Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to drag and drop this in. This is the new one that I'm making. I already have, because I did this, I already have a .git folder, right, for 3A. Now there's 2 possibilities here. I could leave it. If I left it and I have a copy of my Git folder, it has everything, including my remote, right? And that way I have to redo my remote so it points to my new repository. So to make it simple for you guys, without going into too much detail, let's just delete it again and do it from scratch. So delete it, but I could use it if I really wanted to, is what I'm saying, right? So what I want to do is, again, right-click or just click this delete button and it'll delete the .git folder. And this is from my lesson 3A. It's a copy of lesson 2. That's all it is, right? Okay, so if you look at 3A, it says 3A here. And now there's one thing, my package.json actually says 2A. And just for completeness, you should make your package.json say the same thing. It should say like 3. It doesn't matter. I'm not really using my package.json to create a brand new application that I'm going to share with the entire world, right? So I'm just going to put in, if I really want to, I'm just doing this for completeness because I really don't have to do it. It doesn't really matter that much. I'm just doing it so I can show you what to do, right? This is all good. I have no Git repository. I need to create this again. So I'm going to go open up this in command prompt because I deleted my Git repository. Remember, I deleted that hidden .git folder. And when I do that, it deletes your Git repository. So open in command prompt. And then, just like we did before, git init. Remember I told you I would make you sick with the git commands? Same exact commands. Git add dot. You guys should have this by like, your memory now. Git commit -m, and then initial commit. You can use first commit if you like, if you so choose, and that's perfectly acceptable. All right, so I've done my local repository. I need to connect my remote, but there is no remote called _3a. Let's just copy this right here. I'm just going to copy this the way it looks here. I'm going to copy it. So the way to do that is there's two ways I can try and copy this, Control-C. And if I go back out to GitHub now, here's my GitHub page here. By the way, if I refresh this one, this is going to show you my last week's stuff with the .node Jekyll and CNAME, right? But that's not what I want. I want a brand new repository here. I don't want it here in my Celiopolis. I want it in my Centennial College one, right? That's where I'm going to put it. So I'm going to go with Centennial College. I'm going to click this new. And notice that this is a different account name. I have a choice of making it mine if I wanted to, but I'm choosing my other organization. And then pressing that in there and press enter. Which is what it's going to do is going to create my empty repository. It's a container that's completely empty, right? I'm going to grab these last two lines of code here, right here, copy them, and I'm going to go back to my Visual Studio Code and right-click and paste. What if I do it properly? Not what I wanted. Right. Didn't like what I was just doing there. And paste, there we go, and press enter, and then it'll connect me to my new repository. So now my local repository, like we've shown before, COMP125 S2018 _3a, is connected to my remote repository. Okay, nice and easy. So today's lesson is not about how to host stuff on GitHub Pages or Microsoft Azure. It's about arrays, loops, right, is the main thing that I wanted to cover today. Right? Arrays and loops. So let's start with what we covered last week, again, as a review. We covered last week, we had this app.js file. And the app.js file served two of our files, right? One of them is the about.html page. The other one is our index.html page. You're going to have three files for your assignment number one, right? Some kind of bio page, some kind of contact page, some kind of projects page, right? Those are the three pages you need for your assignment number one. I detailed this last week in an assignment number one special video that I made just for assignment number one with all the details. So please see last week's video, right, with all the details that you require for your assignment number one, okay? Notice that I'm using this use strict. So why do I use strict? Who can remember why I use strict? Anyone remember? We talked about this really briefly last week, but it's important, okay? Use strict. Why am I using this preprocessor command? That's what this thing is, a preprocessor command, use strict. Why am I using it? Very good. So it's because otherwise I can have a self-initializing variable. If I use the var or let statement, and if I just initialize a variable with a value, it'll automatically use the var or let, actually use var by automatically, which is very bad, right? Because sometimes we don't want that to happen. That will make some assumptions. That's one thing we don't want to do. So that's why we use strict, and there's other reasons for using strict as well. But what it does is it initializes strict mode, and it happens in whatever scope you put it in. So for example, I've put it inside my function, so therefore use strict only pertains to something that happens within this scope right here, right? Outside of this scope, like if I made some other kind of function outside over here, it wouldn't pertain to that. It wouldn't matter, right? It's only for this. If I took my use strict and put it inside my about button click, it's only in that function. So you can do it only for that scope if you really wanted to. It would be for everything, right? So sometimes people put it out here. I'm putting it in here. It doesn't really matter. As long as it covers most of your work, I recommend that. I'm not making it a requirement for you. I'm not going to mark you bad if you don't use it at all. It's okay. As long as your stuff works, I'm good, right? But I recommend it because it helps with some troubleshooting. That's all it does. It doesn't stop JavaScript from doing anything. It just helps with troubleshooting. That's all it's supposed to do. All right, so we talked about event handling last week. So there's two parts of events. You see the handler. What's the other part of the event handling? There's two parts to event handling. You need two different parts. Which are they? The event listener and the event handler. Those are the two parts. Event listener it listens for the event type, this particular case, there's 3 events that I've kind of created for my my button. There's the button click, button over, and button out event. Those are the 3 events, right? And then the event handler piece, and this is what I mean, again, you might see it written differently online. The whole event listener thing is one piece, but I've kind of broken it down into 2 pieces. The event handler being a named function called whatever the event is, click, and the name of the object, the about button. And some people have also seen it where you can put in, some people use an underscore for that too. I'm not using an underscore for naming. I'm just using about button click, but you can certainly use an underscore for the event type at the end, right? Again, your naming convention is your own. But I recommend a couple things. I'm using upper camel case here, but you don't have to. For the most part, a lot of the naming is done with a lower A in the beginning with button click, so that's camel case. Camel case has a lowercase letter for the first part of your identifier, and then uppercase letters for each of the other words in your identifier. So example, button would be uppercase, click would be uppercase, but about would be lowercase. That's the normal way of doing things. I'm making it all uppercase because I've got a special way of doing things, and there's a reason for it. Because it adheres with Microsoft's .NET standard. That's why. But not for any other reason. And you don't have to. You can name it whatever you like. Please notice I have lots of room to make identifiers. I think identifiers can take up to 30 characters, something like that, or more. Please don't scrounge on how big your identifiers are. Make them so that they're understandable words. You don't have to use I's and A's and B's and C's and X's and Y's. You don't have to do that. All right, notice I also used add event listener. Add event listener is a built-in JavaScript function that basically takes 2 parameters. One is the event type, and the other one is the event handler. We also call this the callback function. That's what it's called, the callback function. And the callback function can be written as a named function. We talked about functions last week. So for example, function and then the name, or an anonymous function that's inline, which we can write just by the word function, and we can write it inline. And we've done that last week. We talked about that last week. So we can, these 2 ways of doing things. And also there's 2 ways of writing functions. How do I write functions the other way? This is the first way of writing functions, which I recommend. What's the other way of making a function about button click? What's the other way? If I was going to rewrite this in the other way, there's 2 ways. What's the other way? Yes. Yeah, so what you do is, this is the other way, very good. So the way it would look, well, I'm just going to kind of comment this out for now so you can see the other way again, just to recall. The way to do it would be, I would use the let keyword, right? The name of the function, about button click, right? An equal sign for, you know, basically making it, assigning it. And then we're not going to assign it to a value, but rather a reference to another anonymous function. Use the function keyword, right, which would be an anonymous function, and then whatever that code would be in here, right? And this is the second way to do it with this syntax. Both of them are valid, right? And you're going to see this a lot online. If you look for look up stuff with Stack Overflow or whatever, you're going to see this way of creating a function declaration, so it's called. We're not going to do it this way in class. We're going to do this function and then about click, a name function method. And the reason why we're doing this is because it's closer to your C#, not because it's better. It's exactly the same in terms of performance. In fact, from an OJS perspective, this is said to be faster. Just putting it out there. Okay? So for now, we're not going to do it this way. I'm just going to erase this. But those are 2 ways of declaring a function, right? But this is the way we're going to do it. We're going to do it this way. A name function with the keyword function and the name. Okay, so we talked about functions last week. I'm just reviewing. What we talked about last week is that's the stuff that I want you guys to think about. When I declare a function, wherever I declare it, even when it's inside another function, it's in that scope that it lives and dies. So if I've declared a function in here inside of this iffy, right here, notice that this about click function's inside of this iffy, this closure, if you will. It only lives and dies in here. It doesn't exist out here, right? When I say out here, I mean like anything that's outside the scope, like out here somewhere. This about click function does not exist. How about if I wanted to make it available though? How do I do that? How do I make certain things available outside the scope of my IFI, right? Can I do that? You can. Now you're going to get mad at me again because I'm going to break the rules a little bit, right? Because this is how it works with us, right? We talk about the rules and then we break the rules, right? I'm not going to break the rules. It is still an IFI. It is still a closure, if you will. No one can get into this stuff in here. But what I could do is I could name this IFI whatever I want. For example, app. Now, if I did this app, right, I've actually created an object that points to this anonymous function, and all the stuff that's inside of it is still unavailable. So let's see what this does. Before I put this up on GitHub, again, I have a terminal window that I'm using, right? I'm going to clear. That's not exactly what I wanted to do. Undo. I wanted to do it in here. And I'm going to clear this. And what I want to do here is I want to use my NPM package that I downloaded last week called Light Server. So I'm going to go Light Server. It's going to pull up your default web server, and it's going to run your application. Yeah? Just like before. Everything was the same. It didn't modify. When I said let app equals to my anonymous self-executing function, it didn't do a darn thing. It still ran, right? However, there are some changes. If I go to inspect now inside my console, right? Don't worry about the little thing. I can see this, but if I type in the word app and press enter, I see that it is undefined, right? Even though I said app is whatever. And in fact, I want you guys to think about this, right? App itself right now is undefined because there's nothing inside of it. I don't have access to any properties. It just refers to the actual function, self-executing function itself. And because I haven't returned anything, everything inside my app is closed still. Right now, it's just a reference to an anonymous function, and it doesn't return anything. If I don't return anything from an anonymous function, it's just a memory location for my anonymous function. Let's return something. So if I go back to my return type, and I'm just going to kind of just minimize this for a second. I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom. And typically when we have a return, we put it inside the function. Now, because my anonymous self-executing function, my IFI, is a function, it can return stuff, right? So if I go back down to the bottom, and if I say return, I can return whatever I want. Let's return a value, like 0. I can do that too, right? That's the first return. If I press save, it'll kick it off. And if I go back here and type the word app, I'll get 0, right? Because that's what I returned. I'm returning 0. The value of app it's saying is 0. Would you agree? You guys agree? Right? Because I'm saying return 0. So my app is 0. So that's what it's returning. It's returning 0. But I can also make it return whatever I want. Hold on. I can also make it return whatever I want, right? Like the window, right? So I can say, well, let's return the window. I mean, that's kind of weird. What is the window? The window is the window object. The window object points to my browser, right? So if I go back now and go back to here and type the word app, I'm going to get a whole different set of stuff, right? Now you can see I'm returning the window object. That's not exactly what I want, but you can see that I can scroll down and see everything that's in the window object. Everything that's included in the window object. Okay? So I can return whatever I want. I can return a value. I can return an object, right? And I can make my own objects. And as a preview for object-oriented programming, now you guys are taking object-oriented programming in COMP123, yeah? Right now. If I want to return an object, I can return whatever object I want. So we have some values in here, right? And one of the things we're always talking about is this title object, right? The title object is locked into this start method, right? The start method itself, right? But I could bring this let title out into the open, like up here. So I could declare a section of parameters that I want to. I can say something like function scope variables. Oh. And let's bring this in here. I'm going to say let title is, I'm going to kind of declare this title as a function scope variable, right? Now, I don't want to redeclare it down here. If I redeclare it down here, it wipes out what the other one is, remember? So I don't want to do this. I want to kind of put it in there like this. So I'm saying, hey, let's define it as a functional scope. I'm going to put it here, my document title, and I want to return the title outside of my function. So if I go back down here, I can just return the title, because title is now a property that is global to my function scope, right? And I can return it. I can return my function. Now, remember we talked about listeners being asynchronous. I may not get what I'm looking for here, but let's see what happens. So I'm going to go back out here, and if I press the app, if I go app, and if I press enter, it says nothing, right? What if I go app.title? Can I do this? And I get this error that says, this title means nothing to me. I have no idea what you're returning. And I'm getting undefined because of a couple of things, right? Even though I'm returning title, and because my window add event listener is asynchronous, I'm returning title before my window is finished loading. It's kind of a weird thing, right? Notice that I'm let title up here, right? And then I call my start method down here. I say, well, hey, when the window's finished loading, call my start method. Okay, cool. I'm going to go back up here. Hold on. And if I go up here to my start method, hold on, and here's my start method, and it says title is equal to document.title, right? Document.title. And I'm outputting it, no problem, because if you see back in here, you can see that my document.title is outputting right here, right? But outside the scope of this thing, when I come to here, title is undefined. Why is that? John, you were going to say something.
Oh, no, I was trying to see what you put for the variable. I got it right.
Nope. It is upside the function. The title is up here. Look. All right. Title's outside every function. It's inside function scope. But it's not available down here, right? Because by the time title is defined, it's never been, there's no value that's ever been assigned to it until it's too late. Remember the way JavaScript works, right? I'm telling it to wait for the window to load here. But all listeners are what? Are they synchronous or are they asynchronous? Asynchronous, which means they fire at their own time, right? Which means I'm returning my title before my listener was even triggered. That's how JavaScript works, right? It won't work this way, right? So the other way to do it is I might have something else that I want to assign, right? Like I want to assign I'm going to wait till my start method is triggered somehow. Here's my start method triggering, right? I want to wait till the start method is triggered and then return something, right? Whatever that start method is, right? I could do that too. Where I assign title to something. I can return title, outside of that. The other way to do it is this. If I create an array, if I create I can return braces like this. And I want you to understand what braces mean. Because we're talking about, I want to just peek into object-oriented programming for a second. Okay, we're not getting there yet. But with braces, what I can do, braces means in JavaScript, it means an object. That's what it means, right? Anything in the braces means an object, right? Now this is an anonymous object. I haven't named this object. It's just braces, right? However, I can return certain values. I can return in list order, I can return something called title. And title, I can assign with a colon another value, title. And now, please, you're gonna be confused when you see this thing, and you're like, "What the heck? What is title, and what does this mean here?" Right? Notice still that title is undefined. I'm not going to get anything right now, right? Because title is still undefined. Because even though I've defined title up here, way up here, it doesn't have a value right now, right? And down here, notice how I'm doing it. Title. I'm assigning a value title, right? I can assign other values as well. I can assign, a number, like my favorite number. Here's another one. And notice I broke it up with comma. These, my friends, are properties, right? Of the object, right? And let's say my favorite number is 5, right? I don't know why it's 5. I just made it up, right? So now I have title and my favorite number. My favorite number obviously is a value, but title, if I hover over it, it says it's undefined, right? Now let's see what I get when I go back out to the browser. Notice the browser here is like an interactive, kind of thing. I can do a lot of stuff with my browser. If I put app dot, now I have two things. It actually pulls up my favorite number in the browser or title. If I press title and I press enter, it still says undefined because it said undefined inside my Visual Studio Code, right? But how about my app dot my favorite number? Oops. It says 5, right? I can assign whatever value I want. But how come title's not working still? Same problem. Because it got assigned undefined before it was done. Well, it's easy to do, right? I could say start is happening right here, right? So here's my start. Here's my start method, right? And you can see that my function start is being called as soon as my window loads, right? But I don't have to make my function start on window load, yeah? I can make something else load. I can point to whatever function I want, like main. I don't have a main function. Let's make one. So I'm going to go to my main function. Let's make one. I'll make one down here. So we'll call it main. Function main. Okay. And instead of my start function triggering, I'm going to trigger my main function. Oop. Yay, main triggers when it finishes loading. Okay, and now I'm going to do this. I'm going to say title is equal to start. Can that work? How is that going to make any difference? Why might this work compared to the way it was done before? Well, here I used to call start. Start came to here, but start doesn't return anything. Yeah, start doesn't return anything. Let's return something. I can make it so that start returns something right now, right? So I can wait till start is called, and then I can return title, right? So down on start can also return stuff, right? Start is a function. So I can say return title, right? So whatever the value of title is now, when start gets called, right, which is document.title, right, I can return. Isn't that possible? So then title, local variable title, is equal to whatever the start method returns, which is this. It gets stored into the title, right? And then it gets transferred to this, right? Even though it says undefined now, it's called after this happens, right? So this still might be a problem, but let's see what happens. Does it make any difference is what I'm trying to say. Going back, if I go app.title, is that going to give you anything different? And the answer is no. Why is that? Guys, you have to understand the order of operations. App.myfavorite number, no problem. It'll always return 5. But app.title, because this is set up the way it is, this return, right, of this function, right? It doesn't matter. But what if, instead of title being title, what if I return start? Or what if I return something else? Some other function that said that's, like main, as an example, right? There's all kinds of ways to do it, right? Now, remember, every time start is called, start triggers all this stuff, right? We don't want this to trigger twice, right? You want this to trigger once, right? But I can return whatever I want down here, even document.title. How about if I did that? What does that equal to now? Would I get my actual title for my document or not? Right? Let's try this out. So here I am again, app.title. And I get this, right? So document.title worked, but title, yeah, of course. Document always has a title. Document is the document, the actual document itself. Document worked, but we know that title should be equal to the document title because we said it right here. Look, in this start method. And people, this is why students get confused about all this. Like, hold on a second, Tom. You said that start, it's going to title is going to be equal to document.title, and then we're returning start because we're making this whole thing happen with main. Main's, going to do this, and I'm saying that title is going to be equal to this. Yeah, but all this happens asynchronously, all of it. So it doesn't matter what I do here. I can do whatever funny dance I want here as I want. It doesn't matter because this is going to be returned before start or main even gets called. And that's the funky thing about events. Events are funny in that they trigger at their own time. You cannot control when an event triggers, right? Easily. So going back to this, we don't need this anymore. I just made, start and all that kind of stuff. But you don't need this because it doesn't really matter. This doesn't make any difference. And I don't have to return title because it's not going to change my order of running start at all, right? And in fact, making title a global variable like this in this particular context won't matter because it's going to be triggered. Can be triggered way after my start gets called, or way before actually. Title, this is going to return this return stuff before it gets called. Now there's other ways to mitigate this, but I'm not going to talk about it here because I don't want to confuse you more than you are. But here, notice that this is two things. This, I'm returning an object, and I can return as many properties of this object as I want. Whatever I want to return out of here, right? But be careful because not all of it's going to be available. I can do that also for any other function. Any function can return an object. It can return an object, an array, whatever I want from the function. Okay, so that's one. So if I save this, and if I go back out here now, oops, did I make a mistake? Title is not defined at start. Oh yeah, see, that's my, okay, this is a perfect example of my use strict coming into play. Look, I never defined title. I got rid of it in the global space over here, right? And now it says in my console, it says that, hey, you forgot to declare title. It's not running title anymore, right? So that's what this use strict does, exactly what Riaz said, right? So if I go back to my start, I have to put the let in front of it because I got rid of it. And now when I go back, we're good. Okay, so now I can do app dot. If I press enter, just app by itself, it'll give me all the properties of app, right? Just app by itself without the dot. Dot is an accessor. And if I click on this little arrow, it gives me two properties, my favorite number and the title. Okay. If I go back to my website and if I click on about, you can see that my favorite number now, my funky number is here, right? And if I type app, right, it's here, right? It's still the same thing as before. So app is an object that I've made available because I've done this. Let app equal to function. That's how I've made it available. And if I don't expose anything, so if I take this return out, like just like here, if I just comment this part out, show you guys. And if I go back here and press app is going to be undefined because app doesn't return anything. Nothing is exposed. However, if I have a return statement, now I'm exposing whatever properties I choose here, like this.
Can I assign this variable?
The return. Return is a keyword. You could make whatever I'm returning into from a variable, yeah, right? I could point to a variable, right? But the problem is that variable is going to have global in scope, which is going to load after the window at event listener. Some funky stuff going on. We'll talk about how to circumvent this problem later, all right? But now if you notice, if I press app in here again, if I go back and press app, enter, I can see I have the same two properties again, all right? So I just want to mention that because you might see somewhere online where you have this structure of some kind of iffy and immediately invoked function expression that's a closure, closing up your code, and then some return statement at the end. You're like, what the hell is this return statement, right? The return statement is returning whatever value you're assigning to your function. I think it's the easiest way to look at it. Okay, cool. So this is that part. We'll leave this in here for now. It doesn't make any sense for now. My favorite number, right? Who cares? I can also add more properties or reduce them. So if I just put the title as document title, I can do that. That makes more sense. Now, if you notice at app, I only have one property, right? Which is this, right? And it'll return this every time, whether I want to or not. Even if whether I look at it or not, it'll still be returning. That's the one thing that I've exposed, right? That's the one thing one property that I've exposed out of my immediately invoked function expression. I've done that with a return statement. That's what I've done. And you can do that with any function, whatever function I want. For example, start right now exposes nothing, right? But I can expose title if I want by using a return. We'll get back to this later on. So we want to talk about loops and also conditional statements. We actually talked about conditional statements last time because we made this switch statement. And just like, I'm not going to go into it, but if you look at the PowerPoint from this week's session, right, you'll see that there's also talks about how to do if statements. Guys and girls, if statements are the same with any C-influenced language. If, else. It's exactly the same syntax, right? Exactly the same with C# and Java and even C++. So too is the for loop, all right? So let's suppose I want to loop through each of the objects that match a certain type of pattern, right? So if I want to look at my about page, here's my about page content. Here's my about content, right? And let's say I want to find all the paragraphs that match a certain class, okay? So in my about, if I go to my about page, right now we only have one paragraph, which is this is a sample about page for COMP125. Yay! Let's take a look at that code here. So in my about page, remember we talked about the 3 pillars of web design: content, presentation, and behavior, right? Well, in my about page, you can see that my paragraph has an ID of paragraph, and it's empty. I'm getting the code from the paragraph content from my code, which is part of your assignment number 1, by the way, right? So if I want to make it so that I want to hit all of my classes, right? All classes that have, all paragraphs that have the class of, my paragraph or para or content, as an example, I can do that. I can cycle through all of them. So let's just say, here's my class. I want to call this content. I'm adding a class to my paragraph content, right? And let's make another paragraph. You can do that, of course. That should be part of your HTML and CSS primer that you took with web interface design COMP125. So if I have another paragraph, and I'm going to use some emmet. If I put lorem, I want to put lorem text of about 200. If I press enter, I have this large piece of lorem ipsum text. What lorem is that like lorem ipsum dolor sit. It's just like filler text that you can put on a paragraph. If I was to kind of look at this as an example, and you can see that now I've got this 200, word paragraph in here that is just a placeholder paragraph for what I have in here, right? And I did that with that command. I'm going to undo that command so I can show you. So if I undo, I just did this. P greater than sign means, hey, in my paragraph, include some kind of lorem text that's 200 words. If I want to, I can make this shorter by changing this to 50, right? And now, if you look at it, it's going to be a much shorter paragraph, right? If I go back, undo, and if I change 50 to 400, I think that's the maximum, by the way, or under 500. You can see now that it's much larger. And it's good for testing from a content perspective, because we don't have any content for our pages right now, right? Let's make it back to 200, so lorem of 200. Okay, so I want to include this and all of this, right? Okay, well, that's interesting. I've got this huge band of text, and I've got an idea of paragraph, and I've got some content here, and I want to also use a class of content here. Okay. Now, my friends, we have the ability for me to use another way of selecting stuff from using JavaScript. I want to select all paragraphs that have the class content. Right? That means I should select this paragraph here, which right now has nothing inside of it, and this paragraph here, which has all this stuff. Okay. Nice and simple. Yeah, of course, because class name indicates there's something similar between the two things, right? So then if I go back to here, and if I want to go to my app.js, I've got my paragraph as paragraph. But what if I said something like this? I said, what if my I want to get more than paragraph, more than one paragraph. So paragraph content, I'll call this paragraph. Let's just call it content for now. Let content equal to document dot, and now this is something else. There's get element by ID gives you one object. But if I say get elements by class name, elements gives you a hint that there's more than one element. Okay? More than one element. Okay? So if I get elements by class name, and if I put the class name in here, because notice it's the class name string, which is content. Now, again, it's only going to work inside of my about page because I've put it inside my about content function, right? It's not going to be triggered in my home content because my home content doesn't have any paragraph with a class of content, right? And that's why I've done this here. Okay? So like content equals document.get elements by class name content. Okay, cool. Well, let's print this out. Let's see what I get. So console.log, and then we're going to type out the word contents. So it's to see what happens. Okay. I can type it there. So what do you think I'm going to get here when I type, what console am I going to get? What log am I going to get here? What do you think I'm going to get? So again, I'm saying get elements by class name, content, and I've got two paragraphs with content. So what am I going to get? What is it going to return? What do you think? What do you think? Let's see what I get. All right. So, hey, look what I got. I got this HTML collection. That's what it says, 2. And I've got paragraph content, and then p.content, and then paragraph p.content content. All right. So I got like some other weird stuff going on here. Okay. So what does that mean? Well, I've got 2 elements, 0. Notice if I hover over it over on the left side, it tells you what it is, right? Here's 0. And here's 1. So this one. Okay, interesting. I got one that's kind of empty, right? And I got another one that is, and if I kind of hover over here, it says, if I scroll in here, it says that if I look at my text content, remember, text content is part of this, right? If I scroll down, so I can view this, text content is nothing. How come I didn't get anything here? We're going to talk about this in a second, right? Here's my text content. It's nothing, right? And then, but what about if I look at the other one? This is element 0, and here's element 1. If I scroll down to my text contents, you can see that my outer text is this, and my text content is also this, all this stuff. How come I got content for this one, but not for this one? I didn't get this one at all. It was like empty. How come? Well, it comes down to order of operations, yeah? So I'm saying that my paragraph.text content is equal to my sentence. I'm injecting it here, right? And then I'm telling you, well, let the content do another search and let the content return everything that I'm getting by class name, right? So I'm saying anything that has the class name content, I want you to return it. And I want you to put it in this object called content. And notice it says, I'm getting back an HTML collection. It's no longer an HTML element because I'm getting more than one element returned. I'm getting back, effectively, an array. Okay? So if that's true, if I wanted to have my content of array element 0, and you guys should know how to do arrays by now, that means I should get back the first paragraph, which is this one up here. And I define that because inside of my paragraph, inside here, this one comes first before this one. It searches in, kind of document order. It looks through this and it searches through all the stuff and says, oh, look, I found one. Okay, put that in there. And I found another one. Put that in there. Okay, that's what it's doing. So if I want to just return this one, content 0, that's different. And notice it says, I got this paragraph ID, paragraph, class, content. But I got No content. It actually did not return. It did not return my string. Returned an element. Because I get an array of elements. That's what I'm getting back. I'm not getting an array of strings. If I want the string that's attached to the element, I have to do the following. I have to say content0 dot text content, right? Because text content belongs to my, huh?
Mainly basic syntax is related to a C#.
All the same as C#.
All same as C#.
Pretty much. But this is a key because here I return elements, not strings.
Just
right?
arrays.
It's an array of elements. Array of elements is each one of the elements that matches my query. This is my query, right? It matches my query. Each element is returned. So when I return 0, 1 elements, 2 elements, right? It's 2 paragraph elements. That's what it returns. However, it does not return their content, just the element reference itself. Now I'm returning the content. Now, what do you think the content's going to be? Let's see. Should be the string, but guess what we got? Nothing. We get nothing because initially that page does not have any text content inside there at all, right? Notice that I'm saying my text content is equal to my sentence. But again, this happens asynchronously, which is kind of a weird thing for JavaScript, right? It's almost like I got to wait for the content to be injected, right? Because this happens on page load, right? And so does this. But it happens at the same time. I'm just saying, because we're injecting content in here like the way we're doing, that's why we're getting this thing the way it is right now. However, if I look at page content number 1, from the one that we already have, if I want to search for more than one, you can see that now I get everything from this paragraph here that we put in. Because this, my friends, was physically put in, right, from the page itself. This was existing content in the page. This was content we injected, which is nothing. There's no content originally in that page. And that's what we're actually asking for. Okay? So just to note, so get element by ID returns 1 element. Get elements by class name returns 2 elements. Returns 2 elements, a reference to 2 elements, which automatically creates an array of HTML elements, not an array of strings. Okay? But again, if you were going to think about arrays, and if we were going to return the way we set up an array, just like normal, and I'm just going to put it out there for posterity, not for any other reason, for completeness, is let my array, right, is equal to, you can set it up with a couple ways to initialize the array. I could set it up with square brackets, right? Square brackets means, just by itself, means creates an empty array container. That's all it means. That's what square brackets means, okay? So if I did this, and I was to print out my array instead of this, let's just print out my array, right? So I go my array. If I print that out, and if I go back to here, you can see that there's an array with just these square brackets here, right? And it's got a length of 0. So an array, each array has a length property, which automatically is calculated when the array is created, all right? Arrays are really super powerful in JavaScript, and we're not going to let them go this week or next week or the week after. They're super, super powerful because we can use them for a lot of things, right? So this is the basic way of declaring an empty array container. Now, if I want to initialize the object, I can initialize my array the following way. I can say my array, right, 0. Notice I didn't declare a size, the first element of my array, because we're using 0-based counting, just like we do with every other C-influenced language, right? My array 0 is equal to hello world, right? Let's actually put in some stuff in there. Hello world, right? Oh, here's the problem with JavaScript. I can say my array 1, right, is equal to the number 5, right? And this is bad, right? And my array 2, right, can be equal to true, right? Why is this bad? Because now I have an array that returns different things, right, which is not the same as C# and Java and C++. This, my friends, is an X when it comes to C# and Java and every other thing, because you can only have an array of type. There's no array of type here. This is an array of whatever I want, right? And this is where JavaScript developers are like, come from the C# world, they look at this and they go, oh, I hate this. This is terrible. I get arrays of like, stuff, and it's whatever element that I want, right? Which is bad. And to show you this, if I go here, I can see that I have an array of 3 elements, right? Where I have hello world, 5, and true. And if I open this up, you can see each of the elements. The 0th element is hello world, the first element is 5, and the second element is true, with the total length property of 3. And if I want to see the length, so if I can say console.log my array length, I just print it out nicely. Plus, I can concatenate the array length, which is my array dot length. That is a property that's part of the array. Sometimes in some languages, arrays, and I want you to think about an array in JavaScript as an array list. Don't think about it as a classical array, okay? It's not a classical array in JavaScript, like as if it's in C# or Java. It's an array list, which means I have other things, other methods that I can pull off with arrays in JavaScript that you can't pull off with C# or Java if it's a normal array. All right? So in C# or Java, we use count for array lists, right? A list, right? But length is normally, or size, one of the two, if you're using a vector in C++. But here you can see my array length is 3. Okay. Whew. Hello world, blah, blah, blah. And what if I added more to it? Like, I can add as many elements as I want, right? This is one way of declaring my array. How about another array declaration? Yes?
Array size is not fixed?
No.
What should it? Usually asking fixed.
No, not for JavaScript.
You can use constructor.
Because it's like a list. Have you guys done lists in C# yet? So lists can also do something like this. My array dot push, because it's like a list as well, and I can push on whatever element I want. Like, here is another element, right? I can do this too. And now I have 0, 1, 2, 3 elements, right? Watch, right? So now I have this. Yeah.
You can push from the start.
Yes. I mean, on the start, you can pop it on the start of it. I believe you have to. I think you have to insert. There's another function for that. So if you look at all my array functions, because my array is now an array, I can go dot, and you can see that you can look at join, keys, last index of, length, map, pop pops it off, reduce, reverse. We're going to talk about reduce later on. Shift, I think might do it. If I look at shift, it actually tells you what it is. Shift, no, that wouldn't do it. Shift does that. Let's see what else it does. There's another one that does it. Reverse actually reverses the array. So it actually reverses the order with one thing. Sort, splice, to local string, to string, converts to a string, unshift. I think that might, one or the other. Shift and unshift might do it. And to look it up for those two things, if you look at array.shift JavaScript, you're going to see what it does. It doesn't do what you think. So whatever the array prototype.shift is, the shift method is what we want to see. And it says remove the first item of an array. That's what it does. Removes the first item. It just shifts it off. Yeah, it just takes it off. So it shifts it to the right, like you said, right? And then unshift, it goes back. Yeah. And now where does it go? Does it go to the top? And that's the key. That's what you were asking, right? I believe unshift does it. So if I go back to unshift. The unshift method adds a new item to the beginning of an array. There you go. That's how you pop it on the top. So you can do almost everything with shift, unshift, pop, and push. And there's other ones too. There's splice and slice and a bunch of other array methods. But remember, an array in JavaScript is not an array in C# or Java or C++. It's a list, more of like a list. It behaves like more of a list than anything else. All right, so there's other things. Notice here's something that you can see. This is another way of declaring, just by chance we're here on this page. This is another way of declaring an array. You can actually pre-declare elements of an array by doing it this way. The fruits array banana, orange, apple, and mango. And this is an initialization syntax as well. Yes. There is an array constructor for this as well. So if I want to use my array, here's the constructor that I can use. Let's just do it that way instead of this way. We won't do it this way now. Let's make my array something different. We'll say let my array is equal to a new array. You can do that too. This is actually syntax. In brackets, then I would put the array type. Or what do you want to make the array? Let's say an array of string, right? That is also valid. But the thing is, string, I don't know if that's right, because there is no string, right? In JavaScript, this would be valid typically, right? And I'm just going to go out to TypeScript for a second. There's a tool that I recommend also looking at. You go to typescriptlang.org. We're going to get to TypeScript later on in the course. And if I go to Playground in TypeScript, this is a really cool thing, right? Here's a Playground. And if I type in that exact same thing, if I say let my array, take a look at the right, equal to a new array of string, right? As an example, you can see that this is what it does, right? So notice that that's what I want to do. That's constructor notation, right? And this is what you wanted to do. You wanted to do this because this is what we're used to in C#, Java, and C++. Kind of in C++. Not really. But if I go here, what it's really looking for is just new array. And that's constructor syntax, right? Constructor syntax. So what this does, this equivalent to let my array is equal to dot, dot. Okay? So one or the other, this syntax or this syntax is like the same thing. Yeah?
Also seen that when you define an array, you don't use curly brackets, you use square brackets.
Yes, it does. Curly brackets are no good, right? That's something different. Curly brackets, remember in JavaScript means object, right? That's what I can do. So I can make any kind of array, and I know we're timing out here, and I want to kind of end off with some other things. Right now, this is an array of any. We don't know what type it is, right? That's what it is right now, until we assign values to it. However, you can also use this syntax. I'm just putting it out there so you guys have it in the video. You could use this syntax. I can predefine an array, right? And inside, I need to end it off with a semicolon, by the way. But I can define an array of whatever I want. For example, I can start defining strings, like my first string, right? Like we talked about. This is initialization syntax, right? I can do this, and I can just copy this a bunch of times. So let's just put, this over here, and this over here, and maybe this over here. And let's just change this to second, and third, and fourth. This is good. This is a good initialization syntax, right? And if I go back to this, and if I go back to my page for a second, which is this one, you can see now that I get my first string, my second string, my third string, my fourth string, right? And if I look at the elements on the page, I can see that I got 0, 1, 2, 3, the 0th, first, second, and third element, and they're different strings, yeah? However, you can also make them objects. So let's suppose I have an object, an array of objects, and the array has an object of people, right? I have a name, which is Tom, with an age that is, I'm going to make myself really young, 25, right, which I'm not. And then let's add some other people's names with other ages, right? So let's just do one of these and one more time. So we'll say Tom, Bob, Mike, and I don't know, we'll make other names, Juan, and I don't know, some other name, Smith as a first name? Okay, Smythe, we'll make it Smythe, right? And make different ages too, so 35, 45, 55, and hell, 65, why not, all right? There we go. So what do I have here? I have an array, I don't need this last comma, I have an array of objects. Each object has two properties, name and age, right? Now, Visual Studio Code, if I hover over my array, it shows me an array of objects. Yeah. You can ask them? I could do that, but I could use one array of objects. I can make multiple dimensional, but if I make a multiple dimensional array, that means like an array of both.
Dimensional array, you use multiple objects inside of it.
I can do that too. And there's many things you can do. But here is an example of an array of objects, right? An array of objects. Okay. So if I have an array of objects, now what does this look like here? Well, it looks like this, right? I have an array of objects. Each element is an object. So it has a property age and a property name, right? And this is very powerful, right?
Seems to be hybrid.
No, this is actually very valid. I can do the same exact thing in C# and in C++ and even in Java, right? An array of objects is totally cool. I just initialize them as anonymous objects. They don't have names. They're like new anonymous person objects, as an example. That's what they are. All right, so this is totally cool syntax. This is how we can initialize stuff inside of an object. And if I want to, I can still further go down here and say, my array dot push, 5, right? And I can also do my array, my array 20, right? This is also something you can do, is equal to, okay, this is weird. Okay, and now let's see what it does, right? So I have that. Well, here's my array 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 20th element. Right, which is totally not possible, right, in C++ or Java or in C#. Can't do it that way.
Really flexible.
Flexible and damaging, flexible and dangerous, flexible and shoot yourself in the foot kind of thing, right? Well, you don't want to do this kind of thing too much. So can we do this? Yes. Again, I'm going to kind of go back to the gun example that I've kind of used before. You have a gun in the house. Shoot somebody that makes you mad in the house? No, just because you have a gun doesn't mean you have to use it, right? And that's maybe more of an example of something in the States, unfortunately, than here. And I don't say that with any humor. I say that with a lot of sadness, right? But the reality is that just because you can do it, and I'm sorry for the bad joke, just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. And I want you to remember that. Just because you can do something in C#, Java, C++, whatever language you want to put in, doesn't mean you should, right? You got to organize things in ways that make sense for you. So we should never do this. If we're going to declare an array of objects, we should make it objects all the way, right? And the way to do that would be something like this. Instead of doing it this way, we want to push or add an object just like this, the same syntax, right, for an object. I want to push another object onto it, so I can do that in here in the push, right? I can push another object instead of Smythe. Let's have a name like, I don't know, Carol, right? And Carol is 15 years old. She's a young girl, right? And now if you look back, I have an array of 6 elements, and one of them is Carol. Notice that she gets popped into the last slot there because I pushed her on, right? And if I unshift, let's do that, because you can do that as well. And then we'll end with this one, myArray.unshift. And I can do the same thing. So let's pop in another object, right? And let's pop in an object of something else. Peter, let's say. Peter's 25 again. Another person is 25. And if I do that, you can see now that I should have Peter at the beginning, right? So Peter is the 0th element. Yep. So the question is, can I force an array so that all objects in the array are the same type? The answer is no. And that's a negative for JavaScript and a positive for JavaScript, because sometimes you want an array of every element on the page. And all the elements might be different, right? Not just HTML elements, but other things too, right? So for example, other things. You can have an array store everything that's on the page itself, right? And output it, which we're going to get to next day. Any questions about arrays? We covered arrays in some detail today. Again, you should know arrays, so I'm not going to cover all the different things. And if you look at the PowerPoint slides that I gave you guys, or read the book for Chapter 3, it should have everything you need in there for arrays. Also today, I covered, well, before we end, I also covered how to put your website up online. So please look at this video for assignment number 1. You're going to need to use it. There's 2 options I gave you. One is GitHub Pages, and the other one is Microsoft Azure. Those two options are both viable for us, right? Any questions before we stop? I'm going to put this up on GitHub so you guys have this version of my code. All right, and the video should be up within probably about half an hour or so. Okay. Otherwise, thank you so much. See you guys tomorrow. And remember, tomorrow we'll have an exercise to go along with this craziness, right?